All right, joining us now with more reaction, Fox News contributor Gregg Jarrett and Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz is with us. Professor, start with you tonight. Odor of mendacity. Let's get your take overall on the case and the lack of logic or the lack of the application to both Fani Willis and Nathan Wade. That should have at least been consistent because they were both involved in this.
Look, there's no odor here. There is perjury on the witness stand, without a doubt. There are people in prison, people on death row, on lower levels of evidence than this. What the judge tried to do was be Solomon and split the baby, and the baby died. This is a terrible, terrible opinion. On the one hand, he says, I have a reasonable basis for wondering if the testimony is truthful. Then he proceeds to credit it and believe it when it comes to whether she paid the money back, whether or not they had the affair, all of that kind of thing. This case belongs in front of a Justice Department or an attorney general or a district attorney for a criminal prosecution. There was perjury, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit perjury. This is not a close case. There was, of course, a real conflict of interest. No, maybe the prosecution didn't begin in order to enrich either of these two people, but along the way, decisions were made which enriched them and which may very well have impacted on the rights of defendants. This judge should have dismissed her, dismissed the whole office, and seriously considered dismissing the entire case. And I think the lawyers for Trump, if they can, should try to take an interlocutory appeal or a mandamus, some kind of an immediate appeal to the next level court. If they don't, they will still have a good issue on appeal if they lose if they are convicted. This case is a disaster, and this judge just didn't have the courage of his convictions. He knew that they lied, but he just didn't have the guts to say it directly.
Well, he's running for re-election, Professor, and the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp, launched a state commission with the power to remove rogue and incompetent prosecutors just like her, which I imagine would happen here. Let's get your take, Gregg Jarrett.
Well, the decision makes no sense, quite obviously, because the judge found that both Willis and Wade engaged in improper conduct that merits removal for the appearance of impropriety. That's the standard. But he also found that together they committed the exact same wrongful behavior. So both of them are guilty of disqualifying conduct under the law, and yet he orders that only one of them must leave the case. How is that remotely logical? Well, it's not, which suggests, Sean, that this is a purely political ruling for the bench. I think it's a craven, gutless decision to throw Fani Willis a lifeline to keep the case against Trump going, because if she goes, then under Georgia rules of procedure, the entire indictment gets yanked from the DA's office. Willis gets to stay, but I don't know how in the world she survives this politically. I don't know how she survives the myriad of other investigations into her alleged wrongdoing or, in fact, her upcoming election. This judge condemned Willis for playing the race card in her church speech. Judge Janine is right. That's disqualification by itself. He openly admits that the case has, as you point out, the odor of mendacity. That means it's dishonest, and yet he refuses to fix it. His only remedy is partial. That's no remedy at all.
Look, let's be clear what really happened here. Let's be clear what really happened here. The judge started out with a conclusion that he was not going to get rid of her. And then he had to wiggle his way around to find a basis for being able to condemn her, because he saw it all with his own eyes, but in a way that didn't result in her leaving. It was a very result-oriented, but he felt bad about it, so he had to condemn her and say some things about her. But bottom line is, he made up his mind right in the beginning. He was not going to disqualify her. Everything else was a variable. That was the constant.
Well, let me ask you both this question, because the judge did poison the well against her, especially on appeal. It's hard to imagine one party created the conflict and benefited from this and not the other. On the issue of alleged perjury, I would agree with your analysis, Professor. Then you have the whole issue of the fruit of the poison tree.
Sure.
What about, Greg, what about all the evidence that was accumulated by Nathan Wade? Doesn't that now have to be dismissed?
Well, you know, fruit of the poisonous tree generally is evidence obtained illegally, cannot be used. Here, it's more of corrupt behavior that creates the appearance of impropriety and actual impropriety itself, although the judge refused to find that. You know, McAfee said that Fani Willis's testimony was unprofessional, and he actually said it may have been untruthful.
Yep.
But then he goes on to say, and I'm quoting here, not so incredible as to be inherently unbelievable. Well, what the hell does that mean? That's word salad, and it's charitable at best. No sensible person was buying these vacuous excuses that Willis and Wade were peddling during the hearing, but the judge is her apologist now, saying, well, she made bad choices and exhibited, and I'm quoting here again, a tremendous lapse in judgment.
All right, exit last
it was
question.
Unethical. It was disqualifying.
Will this case move forward, or does this case die on the vine? Greg.
Well, I hope it dies on the vines. That's where it belongs. It was never a good case. I would hope that his lawyers can try to bring some kind of an appellate action which will delay. You know, everybody says Trump is trying to delay. It's the opposite. It's the prosecutors who are trying to rush this case to try to get the convictions, if they can, in jurisdictions like Fulton County and New York City and Washington, D.C., before the election, knowing that they may be overturned on appeal. So it's a rush to judgment by the prosecutors. And, of course, defense attorneys want to slow it down. I think this may prove fatal, ultimately, to the case.
Greg, last word.
Well, I think the jurors are going to know that this case is absolutely riven with scandal and impropriety and conflict of interest and is politically motivated. And I think this, you know, is going to make it a lot harder for the district attorney to obtain a conviction against Donald Trump.
I agree.
I don't know. Listen, I lived in Georgia. Fulton County, Georgia, is not friendly territory for anybody that is Republican or conservative or that has the last name Trump. We'll watch closely. Thank you both.